What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is the Race Day Rundown.
We're at Talladega this week, and you want to give a preview of what's happening. 500-mile race, man.
Yeah, this is a long one, but it's also the longest track on the circuit.
Outside of the road courses, this is 188 laps, not a lot of performance points available. The stages break down at 60, 60, and then 68. Denny Hamlin's the previous winner here. Strategy is going to be key, man.
Yeah, and the strategy is very different than most races that we go to, most tracks that we go to. This is, you will hear this from other well-seasoned NASCAR players, DraftKings players. This strategy is essentially stack the back. You're going to want to have guys towards the rear of the field. They're the safest. The main reason, these cars are going 200 miles an hour, inches apart, and inevitably there will be the big one. 15, 20 cars taken out at once is usually about average.
Yeah, that allows the guys in the back of the field to make their way towards the front later on in the race, which place differential is a lot of points and a key metric in DraftKings. Huge impact. We talk about the impact in our breakdown. One thing that we talked about a lot in our podcast, which is linked up above, the projections this week aren't happening. What we did talk about was optimal lineups and just the ability to kind of put it all together. You want to talk about some of that?
Sure. All right. So we looked at the last 6 optimal lineups for Talladega, and what we noticed is the average starting position for all of the drivers, 36 drivers, the average starting position was 22.5. But the average finishing position was 5.81. It's all about place differential this week. Fastest laps will be spread out throughout the field because it's a drafting race. You'll see guys at the towards the back, they'll just get a nice run. They'll get the fastest laps. Typically, because there will be some single file action, I'm sure. But for a good portion of this race, we will more than likely see a lot of double side, 2-wide racing. And that means there's going to be a lot of lead changes. No one's going to be dominating this race.
You're exactly right. So salary isn't going to be as impactful as it typically is on your lineup build. Don't worry about leaving salary on the table. Go ahead and send us tweets of all your weird lineup combinations because you're going to need them. I want to see all these guys with the guy stacking the back. I want to see weird combinations because if you're doing it, you're going to do it right, and you're probably going to hit a home run in the GPP tournament. Again, we're not doing projections this week in our race guide. The race guide links below. It's got a lot of information, especially what he just pointed out with what we're talking about regarding optimal lineups. That's going to be key this week.
And one thing that we'll point out about the optimal is if you take the average, or not the starting positions 1 through 10 in the last 6 races at Talladega, only 5 drivers have made the optimal from that starting position. 5. Go a little further back, 11 through 20th, 10 drivers, twice as many. The number one spot out of this list, 21 through 30, 12 drivers made it from that starting position. And then to finish it off, 31st through last, 9 drivers. So as you can see with those numbers there, you're not taking the guys up at the front. You're going with those guys who can get you that place differential, and the key will be obviously avoiding the big one.
Well, with that being said, I think it's time to get into the list of drivers because there's a lot to look at this week. Again, the guys towards the front, they have some of the higher salaries this week, but we might not be too high on them. Brad Keselowski's got 5 wins here. He's at the top of the salary board at 10-5, starting 10th. I've given an impact score of 6. You as well, just because typically we'd be all over him, but starting 10th, he's in that kind of awkward position where he needs to probably lead more laps than he's going to be able to, and it just is kind of a weird spot.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be building at least 20 lineups or if you're just a Brad fan, he's not a bad play. I mean, you said he's got 5 wins in his career here. That's impressive. He also, if it means anything, he just won the Pro Invitational here on Wednesday. Doesn't really translate too much, but hey, I think it gave us a few keys, to be honest, for the Bristol Dirt Race. Some guys that we weren't really that keen on did well in that Pro Invitational, so maybe there's something there. Probably not, but I think Brad is someone that's worth sprinkling in if you're doing several lineups.
A couple guys that we talked about in the podcast are on the board next. Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano. These guys starting first, seventh, eighth, or first, second, seventh. These guys, they're going to be impactful on the race, I would imagine. Strategies and the way that they approach it are going to be different. We talked a lot in the podcast of how you can approach and use these guys in different ways, but I would kind of lump a lot of these guys into the same scenario as, hey, they're starting up front. It's going to be hard to reach that value, but one of them could hit, and it could be a big payday. Is there one of these guys that you like more than the other?
Well, one guy, we talked about all the guys you just mentioned in our podcast, so I highly encourage you to go back listen to that because there are some fantastic stats. I mean, there's no doubt Hamlin and Logano statistically, I would say, are the best drivers here currently. But one guy that we didn't mention in the podcast, and you completely just skipped over him, and I think there could be something there, was Chase Elliott. He has won here, and he won here recently, just a couple years ago, and I believe he finished second at Daytona earlier this year. Again, there was a wreck right at the very end. Brad took out Logano. But I think I haven't heard many other people or seen on Twitter many people talking about Chase Elliott this week. I've seen talk about Hamlin, Logano, obviously. I think if you're just wanting to be a little different and if you decide you want to play a guy towards the front, Elliott may be one of those sneaky guys. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because I haven't really seen too much Elliott love this year, and he has been decent this year. He doesn't have the wins. He's getting overlooked a little bit by his teammates. He is the defending champ.
Absolutely could write something about that because it could be the right opportunity to grab him where it just is the right track at the right time and he has the speed.
Still risky. It's not. Do not think that that's a lay down by any means. But he may be, if he works out, maybe way more under own than he should be compared to the guys that you just mentioned. I just think that that's like something that should be stated.
Completely understand. Moving on to Kevin Harvick, 9,600, starting 16th. We start to see a guy that has the ability to get some of that place differential we're talking about, but also somebody that's going to start in the middle of the chaos. I've given him a 7 because I think he has a path to the required value that's needed with that place differential. You are a little less high on him, giving him a 5.
Yeah, I only gave him a 5. And that's because hasn't looked super strong this year. This is a wild card race, so I don't think season momentum matters too much. But Harvick lately, to me, just seems like one of those guys who he might be okay at super speedways. He might be able to avoid the wrecks, but you don't see him typically contending for those wins. If he gets a top 10, that's great, and that can help you cash, especially if those other guys that are around him, similarly priced, wreck. He can be worth it, but I'm just more hesitant. I just feel like Harvick's probably going to get caught up in most likely someone else's mess.
So moving on down the list to Kyle Larson, 9,400, starting 12th. We've both given him a 6. Not the greatest play, just as in another place where it's an awkward position to be in.
It really is. It's there's not a massive PD upside. There is still a little bit, obviously. I kind of want to go lower. I wanted to give him a little bit lower rating, to be honest. I was thinking more like a 5, maybe even a 4. I gave him a 6 because of what we have seen this year and the speed. And you still do need to have a fast car to get up front, and I think he has that ability. And we know he's going to be aggressive, and he's been a much better driver this year, I would say, for the most part, except for when I play him in my lineups. I don't think I'll be playing him too much, so he may be a good play for anyone out there watching. But yeah, I'm not a huge guy on Larson this week.
Kyle Busch, you mean?
We were talking about Larson.
Oh, Kyle Busch is next. Is
Yes.
9,200 starting
Yes.
ninth. We've both given him 6s as well.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Not a good day, or not a good race for Kyle.
No, and that's the thing I'm looking at. Kyle Busch is pretty much the same story. Really very similar starting position. I'm not too high on his ability this year with the consistency, the lack of consistency, I should say. It's just going to be tough. There's a lot more plays below him that I think I'm more keen on.
Absolutely, but I do need to be fair. And this actually surprised me. I'm not surprised when I see Kyle Busch at the top or near the top of the statistic board. But I don't really recall Kyle Busch being that good at super speedways. Early on in the race, okay, but it seems like he's always fading back or getting usually in someone else's problem. But if you look at driver rating in the first Talladega race in the last 5, he is the third best driver in driver rating, and he does have 2 top 5s. That did surprise me. But with that being said, he's starting 9th. Even if he does get a top 5, that's good. That will obviously help you win some money, but it's probably not going to make optimal. That's why I'm at a 6.
Yeah, we touched on a handful of these drivers below Kyle Busch in our podcast extensively. Martin Truex kind of warning some folks about. I've given them 4. You've given them a 3. We talked a lot about that. I don't know if you want to shed some light on it real quick and just let people know why.
Well, yeah, really go back and listen to what we said because we did go pretty in depth with them. I really was closer to a 1 or a 2, but given the fact that he's starting 3rd and he's run really well this year, I bumped him up to a 3. But statistically, he is not good at these types of tracks, and it's just usually getting caught in other people's mess. I don't think he's able to keep it clean this race either, so that's why I gave him a 3.
Completely agree with you on that one. That's why we've got Eric Almarola, 8,700, starting 14th. We've given them both a 7. Great super speedway racer, especially here. He's got some recent success. I like him a lot.
Dude, he has made the optimal 3 out of the last 6 times here at Talladega. The only other driver, excuse me, that can say that is Joey Logano. And Joey Logano has a win here. Eric Almarola is fantastic. If I'm looking at this correctly, he has an average finish in the last 5 first Dega race of 10th. That also includes 4 top 10s out of 5. That is impressive. Touched on it in the podcast. I think a big part of that is being with an equipment that was less than most drivers. You know you don't have that good of a shot at most tracks. But most of these teams and drivers, when they come to a race like this, they know that they're probably going to wreck, but at least they know they have a chance equipment-wise to compete with the Denny Hamlins, the Chase Elliott's, the Truex's of the world, because there's no other type of racing like super speedway racing. That's one of the reasons why I think Almarola has become such a good plate racer, because he's focused on it, because he knows that this is his best opportunity to really, establish himself as a solid driver in this series.
And I think the next driver on the list, Ricky Stenhouse, you could pretty much copy and paste what you just said. Starting 17th at 8,500, I think really is applicable to the same situation. And I think we talked about it a little bit, where I think plate racing really fits his style.
Yeah, you could say that. In the first Dega race in the last 5, average finish of 9.8, has a win and 3 top 5s. I don't think you're going to get that type of statistic from Ricky Stenhouse in that short of a span at any other track on the circuit. He's a similar thing. He's had to perfect these types of races to prolong his career. being in lesser equipment.
Well, I think we should cut through a couple of these guys in this tier and move on to some guys that think would be more impactful on this race. I think Harrison Burton starting 39th at 7,900 is a great way to start this conversation out in this lower tier. Stack the back. We've talked about it. He can't get much further back than 39th. 40 cars in this field, starting on that back row. Great avenue to value if he survives the big one.
And that will obviously be a big if. I'm sure he's going to want to try to get in there and just prove himself. I mean, I think that's what most drivers are going to want to do when they're making their debut. And it could work out for him. I don't know if it will. I think being that it's his first race in the Cup Series, if I was getting these types of numbers, 39th, 7,900, and it was Austin Cindric, I'd love it a lot more. But the for Burton being his first race, I gave him an 8 because of the PD upside, but geez, it's still risky in my opinion.
I agree. It's going to be risky. He's got an opportunity for value, though. It's going to be stack the back, find a way to get him in there. Not 100% exposure by any means, but a good one to play with. I think Ryan Newman, we talked about again in our podcast, 7,600, starting 28th. Great experience. Just an ideal person whenever you talk about restrictor plate racing, super speedway action. He's always seems to find his way in the mix at the end.
Absolutely. Ryan Newman is one of the best plate racers there are for these guys in lesser equipment. When we start getting in these guys starting below 25th at a track like this, we're looking for, okay, who's got the most experience and who's going to be in the best equipment, and he fits both of those. And not only does he fit both of those, I mean, his stats are actually impressive at these types of tracks. Check out the Garage Thoughts. We'll put a link to where you can find that in our Patreon, because he really does have some nice finishes here. I mean, even the race that thankfully we didn't lose Ryan Newman on, but came really close, he was going for the win right at the very end and wrecked, but still finished 7th. At Daytona. I mean, this guy is he's as close to a lock in my opinion. I gave him a 9 in this for this race.
I gave him an 8 because I think he's got a great impact. Another guy who could have a big impact, Eric Jones, 7,500, starting 22nd. I gave him a 7 because I don't know if he's got the best equipment, but if he's able to survive and find his way through the big one, he has the ability and the decent enough equipment to survive the race and be in the mix at the end.
I don't have a ton to say about Eric Jones, but I will say these two things. He's got good stats in his former equipment. He's won at Daytona. I gave him an 8, and the reason why I'm still giving him an 8, even though, as you mentioned, he's in lesser equipment this year, Bubba Wallace was in this car last year, or for the last few years, and he has really good stats at super speedways. I think Eric Jones is going to be fine. Starting 22nd, not as much PD upside as you would like, but as a solid play in my opinion.
We're going to jump ahead down to Michael McDowell, 7,200, starting 23rd. We're aligned again with I'm giving him an 8. I think with his win earlier this year at Daytona, he's shown that he can win on the super speedway. He's been consistent on super speedway, has good numbers. I like him. I think he's worth the money.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add about McDowell. I gave him an 8 because he is legitimately a solid plate racer, and he won at Daytona.
Bubba Wallace, 7,000, starting 24th. I gave him an 8 because he showed quite a bit of speed early at Daytona this year in that new Toyota. I think that if he's able to survive the big one with his ability at super speedways and his previous success being able to navigate some of this, I think with that 24th starting position, there's good value path at that point.
I do agree with you. I'm at a 7. I'm a little less just because I haven't seen what we thought we might see from this team. They're struggling, which is what you probably should expect from a new team. But with all the hype with Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin Bubba Wallace coming over. I think expectations were high, and they were higher than they should have been. He's a solid play here, and in my opinion, but I'm a little bit more hesitant than you are.
Cole Custer is next on the list, 6,800, starting 27th. I've given him a 7, I think, just based on the stack-the-back approach. He's a guy that is in solid equipment, in the nice range where he offers a lot of upside with place differential. I like him even though he can bite us.
Yeah, I give him a 7 as well, and it's strictly just because of the equipment and the PD upside. But I do expect to more than likely get burned by Custer in some of my lineups.
I completely understand where you're coming from. Chase Briscoe, 6,600, 25th is his starting position. I've given him a 6. Just being a rookie, he's learned a lot. I hope that since he's in top-tier equipment, it makes him more relevant this week. He's in a great position, starting 25th, to offer a great avenue to potential value. So I want to have some exposure, but I'm not as confident.
Yeah, that I gave him a 6 as well, and I stretched that a little bit, and that's Briscoe himself has talked about how much harder Cup is than he expected, and he has really struggled this year. I know at some point he'll start to find it, but he may not find it towards the end of the year or even next year. This ranking is just completely based on equipment and starting position, and obviously there's no really salary to worry about.
Yeah, no. So I want to get on to the next couple guys here. Tyler Reddick, 6,500, starting 20th. I've given him an 8 because I think he's got good equipment. If he can manage to stay out of the big one, he's somebody that this kind of racing style I think fits his mold. I feel that he could really benefit if he is able to survive late in the race.
I gave him a 7 because I think he's going to – the thing that's going to hurt Reddick is the thing that is going to help Reddick as well, is his aggressiveness. He'll have a fast enough car to make it up to the front. His teammate Austin Dillon is a really good plate racer as well. So they're going to come with good equipment. He's aggressive. He's going to find his way up to the front. I truly think he has a complete capability of finishing top 5 in this race. But I feel like he's a little bit riskier. That's why I'm not quite as high on as you, because I think he's going to cost him at some point.
Could be the start of the big one.
Yeah.
Ryan Preece, 6,400, starting 29th. I've given him an 8. I think he's been pretty fast, starting 29th, hanging out towards the back for most of the race. Has the car, has the ability also to get that car towards the front and be somebody to contend with at the end if he survives.
I like Preece. He's an 8 for me. You can't get much worse than 29th, obviously. I mean, you can. If he can just avoid the big one, that's obviously kind of the cliche of this week. He can certainly contend for a top 20 and even a top 15, and at that point, that's worth it.
Chris Buescher, 6,300, 21st. I've given him a 7. I don't think he has as much upside as some of the guys we just talked about and some of the guys below him. He's in an awkward spot for me personally. I think he's somebody I want to dabble with, though.
I give him an 8, and the reason is he does have good stats or decent stats at these types of tracks. I'm a little hesitant because I thought he would do better last week, but to be fair, his stats at that track were garbage. I just thought he was going to have a faster car than normal. It didn't quite work out that way. But I think he will have a fast enough car to contend with it. I think he's a smart plate racer. Again, kind of that strategy of not having the best equipment, so having to really focus in on these types of races. So that's why I'm at an 8. I think he does. But I get where you're coming at with starting 21st. That is a little bit more risky.
Suarez and Chastain are pretty much the same play, starting 19th and 18th, 6,200 and 6,100. We're pretty much in the same impact rating, I don't think we need to talk about them because Justin Haley, 5,900, starting 34th, offers more of a value upside with place differential. I'm not super high, giving him a 6. You're giving him a 6 as well. I think Kaz Gralla is somebody we should talk about more. He's 5,800, starting 38th. I've given him a 7. You've given him an 8.
I did give him an 8, and it just kind of comes down to he should have decent equipment. I believe I should have checked this before. I didn't know you were going to put me on the spot quite like this one. I think he had a really good finish in Daytona. Wasn't that correct? No, he did the road course.
He did the road course.
He didn't do the
Correct.
super. So we don't actually know. The reason why I'm just giving 8, it's just the safest play. He's got good equipment. If he can get through the big one with that starting position, the math makes sense.
Yeah, Kaz Gralla, in my opinion, is somebody that could go a little bit under-owned compared to some of the guys we just got done talking about, but could be very, very impactful. Anthony Alfredo is next. Not somebody I'm really high on. Corey Lejoy, though 5,600, starting 26th. I've given him a 7 because he's been fast. He's been able to show that he's been able to make passes, and if he's able to survive, he's somebody with that price tag and that PD upside could be huge.
Lejoy has made the optimal 2 out of the last 6 times here at Talladega. He also is really good at Daytona. He gets good finishes. He's, again, just, I think, being in lesser equipment for as long as he's been in there, he's had to use these types of races to prolong his career, and he's made the most of it, in my opinion. Making the optimal is no easy feat, even if you are starting in the back. I mean, you still got to survive the big one, and he typically does. So, really like Corey Lejoy. I'm at a 7. Normally this is where we would kind of wrap up and say I'm not going lower than Corey Lejoy this week, but this is actually where you get to have some fun. I mean, I don't love any of these drivers, but this is where most of the optimals are going to come from.
It's so weird to have a conversation and say, hey, J.J. Yaley and Josh Bilicki starting 37th and 36th are part of the conversation. Me, personally, I'd rather have Yaley than Bilicki. I think his equipment and experience lends itself to a little bit more, but you're a little bit higher on Bilicki.
Yeah, I think he'll just be a little lower owned, and there's been times this year where he's actually exceeded my expectations, just not wrecking and other people wrecking and him passing them and doing what he's got to do. I agree with where you're coming from with Yaley with the should have better equipment. Will he? That's to be determined. But you're right. He does have more experience and one spot further back. But I don't know. It seems like Yaley just gets caught up in more stuff or has more equipment issues at times. I think Bilicki has shown to get closer to finishing races recently than Yaley has. That's why I'm a little higher on Bilicki.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I think Timmy Hill starting dead last at $5,000 is enticing because he cannot get any worse than dead last place. I think he's in that position, if he's able to survive, to pick up 10, 12, 15 positions just based on people crashing out alone.
And I gave him an 8, and it's kind of because I like Timmy Hill. I'd love for Timmy Hill to do good. Maybe I inflated the numbers just a little bit, but he is decent at these types of tracks. And he's, again, this doesn't really mean too much, but in the Pro Invitational, he was looking good too. Again, I know it doesn't mean much, but all these guys are running the same sort of equipment. There's no equipment advantage. And so it's like, okay, well, this guy actually does have talent. If he can survive starting 40th, he's going to be perfectly fine in any lineup.
I think the guy that I'm going to say is the bottom of the barrel for me is BJ Mcleod, 4,700, starting 31st. Somebody that has the experience. He's been fairly good at track super speedway races. Again, it's a survival of the fittest. He has the experience to get around the track and survive towards the end. And if there's that big one that we've talked about so many times tonight, I think that he could be a great avenue to help unlock the door to an optimal lineup at the end of the thing.
I don't really know how he does it, but BJ Mcleod seems to, even in non-plate races, find a way to improve his position and get a top 30 finish, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're getting a price tag like this, you don't need much. But at a track like Talladega, where he's not going to have the fastest car, so if he's running more towards the back, the big one happens, he gets to pass everyone because they're on wreckers. That's the easiest way to pass them at this type of a track. And then, starting 31st, he finishes inside the top 20. Bang, money. So I always like BJ Mcleod as sort of a punt play, but he's a legit viable option this week.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'm excited for the super speedway action. It's always fun. And anything that you have to add to the mix to end the show with?
No, I just want to give a shout out to everyone who watched the video last week, who commented, who subscribed. We appreciate it. We're obviously still kind of growing here and learning our way around YouTube and whatnot. But if you do enjoy or are enjoying what you're seeing, give us a like, subscribe, and comment. If there's some things that you'd like us to maybe do that you're not seeing from other content creators, let us know and we'll see if we can help you out there.
Like I mentioned earlier, I want to see those lineups on Twitter at the DK Garage. We're active there as well as on Instagram. So make sure that you follow us on both those platforms. We like to give out our dark horse pick every day or every race. That's available there as well. So also down below, all the links are available to you, as well as our race guide. That's a visual portion of what we just got done talking about, so please download that and check it out on our Patreon. I'm Joe, that's Jeremy. This has been fun. Let's get some racing action at Talladega underway.